So, on this episode, we've got something so powerful, so unbelievable, well, it might just be unbelievable, because, well, there is definitely a question on whether or not this card is real or not. And yeah, we've been kind of in the middle of this weird spoiler season kind of thing where we got some, actual spoilers for the last week from Wizards on Dominaria United, and then we got some spoilers over the weekend for whatever reason on Infinity, and then this today. For whatever reason, this is just miscellaneous spoiler season in between things, I guess. Regardless, if this ends up not being real, make sure you blame Eddie in the comments below. Just kidding, it's not Eddie's fault. But do blame Eddie for, helping out with the suggestions on this episode. And now with all that said, let's jump into it. So here is the image that sparked this episode and much debate online on whether or not this is a real card or not. And if you were here during spoiler season a couple of months ago in Kamigawa, well, it seems like whoever took this picture took some inspiration from many of the people who took pictures of cards back then as well. Okay, I should complain about the graininess of the photo. Let's get onto the custom version of this card so we can actually read it though. And again, a huge thank you to MTG.design for helping me create this custom version. Nevertheless, Sheoldred is a 4/5 Phyrexian Praetor that costs 3 black. That's right, Sheoldred is back. Okay, again, disclaimer, potentially back because this is not a confirmed spoiler. Regardless, it appears Sheoldred is back, which, yeah, wouldn't be all that surprising in the new Dominaria set, as we know that the Praetors are going to be there, and we have already seen what, at this point, 4 of the other 5 Praetors printed in new sets. I think the only one missing now, if this is a real Sheoldred, is Elish Norn, and my goodness, is that going to be an exciting card when it comes out. Regardless, back to Sheoldred. Sorry, as you can tell, I'm very excited and very distracted. Anyways, ward, discard 2 cards. And that's brutal, but let's keep going. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. This ability only triggers once each turn. And whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies or an opponent discards a creature card, put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. This ability only triggers once each turn. So there's quite a bit going on here, but okay, first up again, ward, discard 2 cards. That is incredibly brutal. Your opponent is going to have to make a massive sacrifice if they actually want to try and deal with this commander. First up again, if they're using a target removal spell, there is 1 spell they're dedicating to that, and then also they discard 2 cards. They basically have to utilize 3 of their cards to get rid of this commander, or at least again I should say, attempt to get rid of it. And of course, that discarding works with that last trigger as well, but we'll get to that here in a second. Because again, like all the Praetors, what we have seen essentially is that they give you a benefit while hampering your opponents. And the benefit that Sheoldred gives you is the potential for a massive amount of card advantage throughout the game. Again, drawing you a card every single time a non-token creature you control dies. Okay, I should say again, only once each turn, but still, if you've got creatures dying, on your turn and your opponent's turns, that's up to what, 4 cards each trip around the table? Yes, in exchange for your creatures dying, but you're gonna have plenty of creatures because, again, of that second trigger, which is incredibly brutal. Because whenever your opponent's non-token creatures die or they discard a creature card, you get that creature. Again, it only triggers once each turn, but still, with each trip around the table, that's the potential of getting up to 4 creatures under your control. And again, that is not only a downside for your opponents in losing their creature, but also a massive upside that you are gaining that creature. So yeah, this is a very powerful commander, and unlike the previous Sheoldred, it has a more manageable mana cost at 5 instead of 7. So this commander protects itself heavily. Again, with that ward, discard 2 cards, it can draw you a ton of cards throughout the game, and it can make you a massive army by taking advantage of your opponent's creatures dying or being discarded. Now again, disclaimer, it is not confirmed that this is an actual commander yet, but that being said, it doesn't mean that we can't talk about cards that would work very well with this potential commander, because I believe that if this is an actual commander, it's going to be quite a popular one, and well, because of that, if it ends up being legitimate, those card prices, the cards that work well with it, are probably going to go up. So if you are interested, I've got a link in the description below to the card list that I am talking about on this episode. And now with all that said, let's hashtag blame Eddie. Just kidding. Let's jump into it. So first up, really quick, I do want to bring up that obviously this brand new Sheoldred is very reminiscent of Turgid in plenty of ways. Now, I'm not saying that it is anywhere near as powerful as Turgid, but it does have similarities, and yeah, even just being in the same conversation as Turgid just shows you how powerful Sheoldred can be. Really quick, Turgid says, whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard on the battlefield under your control. So obviously, Turgid doesn't limit to just, one trigger each turn, and it also doesn't limit to just, creatures. That being said, it does limit it to creatures being sacrificed. But yeah, obviously, Turgid can easily just in one, fell swoop, just get every single creature on the board essentially with certain effects. And of course, Turgid also is an NBFC, and the backside essentially is just, an outlet for infinite mana, and you just win. Because, yeah, Turgid. Regardless, while Sheoldred does have some limitations, in comparison to Turgid, you also, again, have somewhat of a protection for Turgid, again, with that Ward discard 2, and again, also the ability to generate a lot of card advantage throughout the game. Again, each are similar, but different, and yeah, each probably work pretty well in each other's decks as well in the 99. Moving on though, again, like I mentioned, cards such as Doomblade, Go for the Throat, and Infernal Grasp can actually work with this new Sheoldred, though they don't really work with Turgid. Each of these are instant speed, removal spells for just 1 and a black. Doomblades can destroy target non-black creature, Go for the Throat says destroy target non-artifact creature, and Infernal Grasp can destroy any target creature, but you lose 2 life. Again, 2 life is nothing in Commander essentially, so yeah, worth it pretty much every day of the week. That being said though, for the purposes of this new Sheoldred, this is basically, hey, pay 2 mana, gain control of a creature. That's basically what these are. I mean, yes, okay, again, I guess for Doomblade, a non-black creature, Go for the Throat, a non-artifact creature, but you know what I mean. You take out a creature and you get it back. Now, that being said, obviously you can't just do that with someone's commander because, if it hits their graveyard, they're just going to send the command zone instead. But still, okay. Some stipulations, but again, basically 2 mana, gain control of a creature. That's a very powerful thing. You obviously just have to make sure that that's the first creature that actually dies in that turn, though, if you really, really, really want that specific creature. But some repeatable effects that end up happening on every single player's turn can be huge with this commander as well. For example, Magus of the Abyss says, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, destroy a target non-artifact creature that player controls of their choice. It can't be regenerated. And then Ruthless Winnower says, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-elf creature. Call to the Grave is somewhat similar. It says, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-zombie creature. At the beginning of the end step, if no creatures are on the battlefield, sacrifice Call to the Grave. These effects are incredible with Sheoldred. Yes, you're going to be losing a creature as well, but your opponents are each going to lose a creature too. And because of that, well, as long as your opponents have creatures to sacrifice, you're going to be getting 3 creatures with each trip around the table and only losing 1. And we'll talk about some fodder here in a bit that you might actually want to sacrifice, but yeah, at the very least, you get to sacrifice one of the creatures that you essentially stole. And again, when you sacrifice a non-token creature, you get to draw a card, so even more value there. Just be careful of these sacrifice outlets. Again, with these repeatable ones, the more effective ones with this commander obviously are going to be the ones that happen on every single turn. But really quick, another one that does require a little bit of setup though is Kuan Ogre Ascendant, or Kuan's Essence more so. This is a flip creature that says at end of turn, if 3 or more creatures are put in your graveyards from play this turn, flip Kuan Ogre Ascendant. And it flips to Kuan's Essence, which says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. With the amount of removal that we can have in this deck, well, it can be quite easy to hit that requirement, flip this, and make it into an incredibly deadly enchantment. Unlike the previous 3 edict effects that we talked about, this one does not specify a type of creature that needs to be sacrificed or can't be sacrificed, and again, unlike Call of the Grave, this one actually doesn't get sacrificed if there's no creatures in play. So definitely a deadly card as soon as we flip it. And speaking of deadly cards, of course, we can also utilize some Mass Edict effects as well with cards like Soul Shatter, Vonus Hunger, and Zot's Will. Soul Shatter says each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest converted mana cost among creatures and planeswalkers they control. So we're taking out some of the best creatures out there and gaining control of one of the best creatures on the board, essentially. Next up, how about Vonus Hunger, which says each opponent sacrifices a creature if you have the City's Blessing. Instead, each opponent sacrifices half the creatures they control, rounded up. The City's Blessing is incredibly easy to get in Commander, so yeah, basically make your opponent sacrifice half their armies, and we get a creature out of them. Moving on, there's Zot's Will, which says choose one if you control a commander you cast spell, you can choose both. Each opponent sacrifices a creature they control the greatest power, exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards, and create X01 black through all creature tokens with X the greatest power among creature cards exiled this way. So again, we can wipe out some massive creatures, and also we can get a ton of creature fodder. So once we get our repeatable edict effects going, we can just throw away some of those thralls if we need to. But next up, again, keep in mind that our commander also cares about creatures being discarded. So let's talk about cards like Necrogen Mist, Gibbering Descent, and Bottomless Pit. Necrogen Mist is an enchantment that says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player discards a card from their hand. Gibbering Descent says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player loses 1 life and discards a card. And Bottomless Pit says during each player's upkeep, that player discards a card at random. So for the first two, our opponents can choose to discard whatever they want. Now, sometimes, obviously, they can get around discarding a creature card. Other times, though, it's going to put them into a very tough situation where the card that they might want to discard is a creature card because all the other cards in their hand might, be worth more to them. But if they do discard that creature card, then we get it into play. Regardless, it's just another way to take down our opponent's hands, which again makes it really tough for our opponents to ever target our commander. And then Bottomless Pit, again, making players discard cards at random makes it so that, well, we might just hit some creatures. It might hit some absolutely massive creatures because our opponents really wouldn't want to discard that card, but again, random. And speaking of that, of course, we can also utilize some discard spells like Hymn to Torok, which is random. Target player discards 2 cards at random, so yeah, we might just hit a massive creature out of that. Or some discard spells that actually give us some other value, like a Siphon Mine, which says each player discards a card, you draw a card for each card discarded this way. Or we can just make everyone discard everything with Dark Deal, which says each player discards all the cards in their hand, then draws that many cards, -1. So again, don't forget that discarding helps you in multiple ways again with this commander, not only protecting it, but also potentially getting you some massive creatures. And speaking of massive creatures, well, an incredibly spicy card that you might want to consider for this deck is Head Games. It's a sorcery for 3 black, and it says target opponent puts the cards from their hand on top of their library, search that player's library for that many cards. The player puts those cards into their hand, then shuffles their library. Basically, go tutor whatever you want for a player in exchange for the cards in their hand. So again, if you are set up with those discard effects, this can be a fantastic way to essentially just be like, all right, you get these awesome creatures, and now I'm going to make you discard them so I can take them for myself. And even if that player gets one of those creatures in play, you can again take it in many different ways by either destroying it or, utilizing an edict effect, etc, etc, etc. Yeah, a deck built around this Sheoldred can do some really brutal things. Moving on, 3 creatures that I want to bring up really quick that can help us out in different ways, though, are Greel, Plague Reaver, and Thieving Amalgam. Greel has pay X and a black, tap, discard 2 cards from your hand, target player discards X cards at random from their hand. This can wipe out a player's hand, which again protects your commander, and again also gets you a creature in the process in a lot of situations. Moving on, Plague Reaver says, beginning of your end step, sacrifice each other creature you control, discard 2 cards, sacrifice Plague Reaver, choose target opponent, return Plague Reaver to the battlefield under that player's control at the beginning of the next upkeep. So this can help whittle down players' hands because they don't want to keep this in play under their control, and it can force them, if they, can't discard those cards, to wipe out their board and get us more creatures. And speaking of our opponent's creatures, how about Thieving Amalgam, which says, beginning of each opponent's upkeep, you manifest the top card of that player's library, and whenever a creature you control but don't own dies, its owner loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So this can help us manifest a ton of creatures to help us out with creature fodder, and on top of that, drain our opponents for a ton throughout the game. Definitely rubbing salt in the wound with this one. Moving on though, let's talk about some fantastic creature fodder with cards like Resettling Skeleton, Bloodghast, and Nether Trader. Resettling Skeleton has pay 1 and a black, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Again, we're going to be running a lot of repeatable edict effects which we can actually utilize for our own benefit. By sacrificing our skeleton again, we get to actually draw a card thanks to our commander, and yeah, we can just keep getting this back again and again and again. Speaking of which, there's Bloodghast, which has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may return Bloodghast from your graveyard to the battlefield. And then Nether Trader has haste and shadow, and whenever another creature is put in your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay black. If you do, return Nether Trader from your graveyard to the battlefield. So again, all these are fantastic creature fodder that can draw us a lot of cards throughout the game. But of course, just to be safe, if we want to ensure that we have enough creature fodder for our edict effects, we can utilize cards like Dreadhorde Invasion, Ghoulish Procession, and Ogre Slumlord. Dreadhorde Invasion is kind of like a budget version of Bitter Blossom. It's going to make us a zombie army, which again actually just stacks kind of up instead of wide. But if we can just keep sacrificing that zombie army, we can just keep that creature fodder coming. Speaking of which, there's Ghost Procession, which says whenever one or more non-token creatures die, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with decay. This ability triggers only once each turn. Keep in mind, though, this does trigger for our opponent's creatures as well. Speaking of which, there's Ogre Slumlord, which says whenever another non-token creature dies, you may create a 1/1 black rat creature token, and rats you control have Death Touch. This can make us an absurd amount of tokens throughout the game, and again, those tokens are incredibly deadly when this is in play. Again, at the end of the day, please keep in mind, though, disclaimer, this has not been confirmed to be a legitimate spoiler, though again, the image, though grainy, does look pretty legitimate. If I personally had to lean one way or the other, I would say that I do think that this one is legitimate, but of course, only time will tell in the future. We will see if this is the actual Sheoldred, or if Sheoldred is actually even in this set. I mean, I'm guessing at least one Phyrexian Praetor is in this set. Probably just one. Regardless, Elesh Norn is probably going to be, somewhere at some point too. I don't know. Anyways, this is a very exciting commander if it ends up being real. I can see a lot of players being excited about it. And again, if you are interested in some of the cards around this potential commander, make sure you check out that link in the description below for the list of the cards I talked about on this episode. And of course, make sure that you're staying tuned to this channel for even more exciting spoilers, quick takes, and whatever else is going on. There's been some crazy things happening lately. And as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.